Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Sound Bites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon here in our offices in the Bronx, New York. It is May 2nd, approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit about Joe Biden's comments. For the first time since unrest has been taking place at colleges across America, Joe Biden has spoken about this, and his comments were 3 minutes long. We're going to take a moment to go through what he said and also how we got to this moment in time with you, and we hope it'll be informative for many people. Now, before we do that, we do want to mention that if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We look forward to your comments. We want you to know we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out across all the internet, wherever the internet overlords will allow, to hear your voice in chat and in phone calls, telling us, talking with us about the issues that matter to us all. And we hope you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to add your voice to the growing conversation internationally. With that said, let's focus on today. Joe Biden made an announcement. He spoke for the first time about what's been happening at our colleges across America. And it's very interesting what he did and did not say, especially since we're seeing the mainstream news media chop up his 3 minutes of actual conversation and trying to isolate just a single sentence or two to try and make it seem bigger than it actually was. But we'll get into that in a moment. First, we need to understand, how did we get to this point? How did this all start? Well, it all started back on October 7th. Hamas and its military invaded out of Gaza and into Israel. They attacked civilians, not military installations, and they killed, we now know, to over 1,200 individuals, took over 250 individuals hostage. That we know for sure. Now, we were speaking about this on October 8th, as news was just reaching the rest of the world about this and the influence of Iran on this entire horrific terrorist attack was first being revealed. And we did speak about that at length during our Sunday live stream on October 8th. We then continued to follow this, like much of the world, and highlighted several things. One of the most important things is the fact that there were protests almost immediately. This was in November 24th. We had already seen the Democratic Socialists of America and the far left were lining up in favor of Hamas, in supporting Hamas, calling it pro-Palestine, but in fact supporting the government of Gaza, which is Hamas, a internationally recognized terrorist organization. And Hamas was more than happy to accept that help, even as they continued to say what their charter, what their decades-long statement has been. The end of Israel, the removal, the non-existence of the state of Israel and the Israeli people, which is genocidal. So in supporting Hamas, in supporting the choice of the people of Palestine, the duly elected terrorist organization Hamas, the Democratic Socialists of America and the left came out and said they supported this genocide as well. This is an important element that we have to remember. It has been downplayed significantly in much of the mainstream news media and at colleges and amongst these protests that we have seen, that the initial inciting incident, a terrorist attack against civilians from across the world, individuals from Thailand, from Nepal, from the United Kingdom, the United States, were affected by this. Over 54 different nations, their people were attacked, killed, and many of them taken hostage to later be, or to continuously be, tortured and sexually abused, as has been highlighted by the UN and various independent international organizations. This is the essence of this conflict. Now, what may be the inciting incident for many of the colleges across America wasn't what we saw at Cornell University, where students actually publicly stated that they had joined Hamas, the terrorist organization, to oppose and to intimidate students at that university, not the event at Cooper Union in New York City, where we saw that students had to barricade themselves inside the university's library as pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas students were banging on the doors trying to attack some of their fellow students. No, those weren't the inciting incidents. What it really was when Harvard, MIT, the University of Pennsylvania, their presidents spoke before Congress. This was in December 12th of 2023, that we saw that they had to speak before Congress and answer a very simple question. Do these colleges support genocide? Because there had been many statements by student organizations at each of these campuses and some professors at many of these campuses that were excited by the terrorist attack on October 7th. And these colleges were called into question. Is this a violation of the contracts, the rules and regulations of these colleges? Do they support anti-Semitism? Do they support genocide? It's a simple question. The answer should have been simply no. They do not support that. That would be the expected response. That isn't what happened. Most notably with Harvard's president saying, I don't know how you could feel anything but regret about this, but would not denounce the genocide that happened or the plans of genocide by Hamas, nor would they denounce what the students at Harvard University were calling for, support of the genocide of Israel. Now, that led to Harvard's president, Claudine Gay, resigning in disgrace. We saw this also at the University of Pennsylvania. Their president also resigned in disgrace. We saw this affect several schools where they lost their donors and a lot of support. And the American people were solidly against these anti-Semitic attacks and support in colleges across this nation. But the students were not deterred. The pro-socialist organizations, like the Democratic Socialists of America, were not deterred by the fact that presidents were being removed and that colleges were being called into question for their anti-Semitic support. As for members of Congress, various individuals, we saw some of them went so far as to put out bills very similar, like H.R. 6776, which is the Anti-Semitism Inclusion in DEI Act of 2023. This was presented by Representative Richie Torres of the New York 15th District. He's a Democrat, and his bill is very simply to require a publicly traded company to disclose to the SEC if a company has diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to combat anti-Semitism. Notice they didn't go to the colleges. Now, this bill, which was introduced on December 13th, is after Claudine Gay and MIT and the University of Pennsylvania, among other colleges, declined to denounce genocide. And Representative Torres, a Democrat, decided to go after companies to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, DEI, in private companies, but had nothing to say about colleges and their support of anti-Semitism. By having this, if it had been created as law, there would be a record of every business of companies where they stand politically on this issue. And I think that's dangerous, part of the reason why no one supported the bill. But that gives us a pretty clear understanding of the division within the Democratic Party as well as with the far left. The far left was more than happy to support Hamas. They were more than happy to support genocide and anti-Semitism, something that was made very, very clear with the presidents and statements from colleges across this nation saying, no, it's okay. It's just going to be called free speech. And movements at these colleges started getting support from outside groups who were agitating these colleges, trying to turn this into something other than a terrorist attack against civilians from around the world and turning it into a political statement trying to support Hamas because Hamas was small versus Israel, which is bigger. And therefore, according to their definitions, their revised definitions of racism, of oppression, that power is a key component. Hamas has less power than Israel or the United States. Therefore, Hamas must be the good guy, and everyone else who opposes Hamas and their terrorist acts, well, those must be the bad guys. Now, the reason why they do this is very simple, because the far left is a splinter of the Democratic Party and a infinitesimally smaller segment of the United States public. And because they are small and they don't have a lot of power, they must be the good guy, and anyone opposing them must be the bad guy. Their ideology says that they must support the terrorists to be able to support themselves and advance their opinions. This is what we believe, and this is how their ideology functions, and we have seen that in real time. That should trouble many, many people. As we saw the tensions mount at colleges across America, not just the elites, but every college in America started to have this conflict identified and lines being drawn, with the far left having a large amount of influence, many professors being identified as having made and supporting anti-Semitic statements, as well as members of Congress like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar with their own anti-Semitic rhetoric being identified and presented to the public. We started to see something grow. We saw unrest at campus after campus. When we look at the recent, this is from CBS News. This was published by CBS News back on May 1st, yesterday. Violence breaking out at pro-Palestinian, actually pro-Hamas campus protests. And I want you to see, CBS presented a map. Now, looking at this map very carefully, what do we see? These are all the campuses where we have seen protests that have come out against Israel, the war that was started by Hamas. That they're supporting the war. They're supporting Hamas, the terrorist organization. And if you look at this map carefully, what you'll notice is that this map also matches the riots that occurred in 2020. In the same cities, in the same locations, you'll see that we have the same campuses protesting. Now, I look for many other data points, but it's almost impossible. As an example, from the University of Arizona, there was a map showing the George Floyd BLM protests, and I wanted to use that to compare. That site can't be reached. It's essentially gone. It's been wiped out. And quite honestly, it is very difficult to find any data points. It seems like the internet has been scrubbed, or Google may have been scrubbed, denying people the access to information like this map showing where riots were occurring across America. And what you notice is these are in progressive strongholds across America. And that directly matches the universities across America that are very progressive and also having college unrest. And that unrest is matched to Hamas. This should come as no surprise to most people in America, since the communist movement, the socialist movement in the United States, has always looked towards protest, and sometimes violent protest, to promote their agenda. In fact, if we go back to World War II, we can even see that the Communist Party in America opposed America joining in World War II to defeat Germany at that time, to oppose them, and they only changed their opinion once Germany attacked Russia, the communists in Russia, and only then did they change their position. And to be clear, this is something that's been identified by the University of Washington. As an example, the Washington New Dealer identified that back in 1939, the Communist Party was more than happy to try and get peace, to force peace between the United States and the Soviet Union, as well as the 1930s Germany. even though this was opposed by the public and at large, that many Americans even abandoned the Communist Party because they opposed the 1930s Germany and its ideology. Now, I point out what happened in World War II and the Communist Party's influence because it's important to understand what we see today. Much like we see with the BLM riots, matching up almost exactly to what we're seeing at college campuses right now, we also see that same influence in the past, where the more socialist and communist an organization may be, the more they align with terror and terror tactics here even in the modern day. It is consistent. The ideology needs to have that revolution, that break. Now, I think it's important to understand that in context, because this isn't new. What we are seeing right now is a rehash of a trend, an ideology that has been playing out in America since before World War II in 1939. And we see it again now, that a small group of the far, far left are trying to rally support for some of the most horrific ideas and ideologies in the world. We saw that with the communists and 1930s Germany. We're seeing that in BLM and the riots across America. We're seeing that in the colleges today across America. So that kind of brings us up to date. It gives us the context of what we are seeing now, what's happening in our colleges, how the left has influenced our education system, how they have influenced riots that have been happening in America even to this day. With that said, we know that the result of the December conversations with the colleges and in front of Congress was a implicit, if not explicit, support of anti-Semitism at colleges. That has led to unrest. That unrest has led to protests. Those protests have created autonomous zones at these colleges, which is illegal, violating every local, state, and federal law, as well as college regulations. And these autonomous zones have led to violence, outbreaks of fights, and destruction of property. We have been waiting for a long time for Joe Biden to make a public comment about this. He has said nothing, much like we saw from many Democrats during the 2020 riots, where they ignored those riots. They downplayed those riots, very famously with Jerry Nadler saying that Antifa did not exist, and then members of Antifa were caught on tape, on video, actually murdering individuals. Well, very much in that same vein, we see that Joe Biden has been virtually silent, saying nothing and avoiding the issue of the support of Hamas and terrorism in our colleges. But finally, today, he did make a statement. Now, it comes after the fact that 1,600 individuals have been arrested at colleges across America. There have been over 38 events. According to the Associated Press, there have been 38 different times since April 18th where at campuses across the United States, individuals have been arrested. At 30 different colleges, over 1,600 individuals have been arrested. And only now, almost a month later, is Joe Biden beginning to even address this, and all he could do was muster up 3 minutes of conversation. Not even. So let's look at what did Joe Biden actually say.
Before I head to North Carolina, I wanted to speak for a few moments about what's going on our college campuses here.
Okay, so he starts off telling us that his emphasis, the thing that's important to him, is going to North Carolina for his re-election campaign, that his focus is on politics and winning an election, because he tells us that. That's the first thing. Before I go to North Carolina, his priority is going to North Carolina. His priority is the election, not the event that is happening in America. This is coming from the Chief Executive Officer of the United States, the top law enforcement in the United States. And his focus is on politics, not the law and enforcement of the law across this nation.
We've all seen the images. And they put to the test 2 fundamental American principles. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard.
Let me stop again. We've all seen the images. No, we've seen video, not just still photos. We have video evidence of what has been happening at our colleges across America. Those videos mostly have been coming out from individuals who have recorded what's been happening, not the mainstream news media, who have relied more on still images, which are very difficult to discern what is happening. It is a moment in time, and it is easier to influence the public by declaring that one side was good or bad without giving them the context of what happened before and what happened after, or what was exactly said. So he wants to focus on the images that are easy to manipulate rather than the video of full context statements and actions of individuals, which cannot be manipulated as easily. So he's making that the focus. And he's saying that this is about free speech and this is about rioting. Now, he doesn't want to say the word riot because that is a crime. Yet that is what is happening at our campuses, as we saw just this week at UCLA, at Columbia University, and several other universities across the country. Destruction of property. To be very clear, we're looking at universities and we're looking at absolute violence. This is from Manhattan, Columbia University, on April 30th, where they were breaking into a facility, the library. They were destroying parts of that library. We also have video from April 29th, and this is in Portland, another library at another university, which was vandalized. That property was destroyed, that it was taken over by these autonomous groups, these left-leaning organizations, and you can see the damage there for yourself. Again, Joe Biden doesn't want you to look at the image. He doesn't want you to see the video. He wants you to see the images that don't show all of this destruction, that don't show all of this violence, all of this intimidation and coercion. He wants you to see stills which are easily manipulated. So we are getting a very clear picture of what Joe Biden is and is not willing to say to the American people. He wants to minimize the impact that this is happening on America, on our culture, and our future. Again, these are people who will, upon leaving college, will join the government, will join businesses, and will shape the future of America. He wants to minimize that connection.
The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation.
No one has said that you cannot have free speech, nor has anyone said that you cannot protest. We saw for months, since November, people have had protests. And the American people, while they don't agree, no one has said that they cannot protest. They have said, don't disrupt my life. Don't block off the bridges and roads that I use to go to and from work when I don't support your ideology or your protest. Don't disrupt my life to protest something you don't like. There's a very big difference there. That's not canceling free speech. It's saying, don't interfere with my life. Don't try to coerce me. Very big difference, and Joe Biden is trying to minimize it and make it seem like something else. So America isn't authoritarian by saying, don't let your protest destroy my life or my livelihood or my ability to learn and live my life.
Where we silence people or squash dissent, the American people are heard. In fact,
now when he says squash dissent, I want you to understand, we don't squash dissent in America. He's propping up the protests. He's legitimizing the protests that we see at these colleges, these autonomous zones that are being created at colleges. He's promoting the destruction by saying that, squashing that, by ending those protests that are illegal autonomous zones, that have violated local, state, and federal laws, that have destroyed property. He is implying, and actually directly stating, that to end that, to not support that, to actually hold people accountable for the crimes that they are committing, well, that's somehow authoritarian, rather than enforcement of the law as it exists. But let's go on and hear what else he has to say.
Peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But, neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society, and order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. In moments like this...
Now, he's made it clear, America believes in freedom, the freedom of speech. No one has denied that. No one has made that argument. He's inserting an argument that doesn't exist. In other words, a straw man. He's pushing a argument, a question, a debate that isn't present. No one has said that the Democratic Socialists of America, the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Green Party of America, that they can't protest. No one has stopped that. No one has said that students at colleges can't protest in support of Hamas. It is America. Even if we find these things to be despicable, that is not illegal, and no one has said that it is. It is the further actions beyond just protesting that people have had issue with. When they have been denied the ability to go to work, when they have been blockaded from to having their own protest in support of Israel, in support of even Joe Biden's actions to protect the Israeli people, and also to highlight the fact that 34 Americans died. 22 Americans were taken hostage, tortured, and sexually abused. These are elements that do not want to be discussed in the mainstream media because they may affect the 2024 election, which we already know is a priority for the Biden administration. He started with that emphasis. So we're seeing this as a distraction to the issues at hand. Let's go on.
There are always those who rush in to score political points, but this isn't a moment.
It's those who are using this to score political points, highlighting the problem that we see in our education system, especially the higher education system, highlighting the connection that we are seeing between riots that happened in 2020 and what we are seeing in riots today, highlighting the groups and organizations and ideologies that were behind the riots in 2020, the riots in 2024, and their similarities and connections to organizations that have been holding these kinds of protests since 1939. Well, then you're just getting political points. You're just playing politics rather than highlighting realities that exist, evidence that has historically been documented, that is internationally verified and credible. He wants to diminish that reality and to try and pass it off as mere political pandering so that he protects his position and his supporters and his hopes for re-election in 2024. In fact, what we are seeing Joe Biden do in this statement is to try and diminish his opponents and those who are rightly saying that something should be done, that there is a wave of illegal actions in America, which autonomous zones are illegal, and the lack of action from Joe Biden is a sign of weakness in the president. He's propping himself up and trying to diminish his opponents. Let's go on.
For politics, it's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law.
No one was unclear about whether or not destroying property is a crime. We know this. Mind you, there are over 100 professors at colleges right now who are protesting, saying that those who have committed violence, who have destroyed property, who have violated the law should not be held accountable. We've covered this before on this channel. We've highlighted that they are seeking amnesty for these students for destroying property, for creating autonomous zones, for violating every local, state, and federal law, and also the regulations of colleges. They want them to be held unaccountable and innocent, regardless of the crime that they have committed. And here's Joe Biden saying, well, no. If you've broken the law, you broke the law. Okay, Joe, you're the chief enforcer of law in the United States. Enforce the law. Make a statement saying that you will support the enforcement of the law, as we have seen police in New York, in LA, in Austin, and various cities across America have been doing, enforcing the law, ending these illegal autonomous zones and arresting those who have broken the law. Say that you support that. It's very simple.
Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest.
The only people who think the list of crimes that Joe Biden has just mentioned are not a crime are professors at these very same colleges. They are organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America, Indivisible New York, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. It is the progressives and socialists and communists. They're the only ones who think that this is justified, that violating the law is okay. They're the only ones who are saying, making that argument, these riots are somehow protected by peaceful protest. He's speaking, I don't know who he's speaking to at this moment, but he's trying to conflate events that are not similar, nor are they protected by law. That no one except those actually committing the crimes are trying to say aren't crimes.
Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education.
Now, he's trying again to minimize this. He's saying, well, this shouldn't interrupt students at college. This is bigger than just the students at a college. Again, when these students graduate, they're entering into the public. They will be running for elected office. They will be creating laws. They will join businesses and direct those businesses in terms of their policies. This isn't just about colleges. He's minimizing this to make people think that once these kids graduate college, it's all over. They will just be a regular person in our community, in the public, and they will forget about these protests and these ideas that are anti-American and illegal. No, that's not what's going to happen. This is him simply trying to minimize the problem so that he looks like he's still in charge and will prop up his re-election bid.
Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
See, he again minimizes it. This is about fairness. No, it's not about fairness. It has nothing to do with fairness. By the way, the law has nothing to do with whether something is fair or not. And he knows that. He's a lawyer as well as sitting in the White House. He knows fairness is not in the Constitution. It is not a right. But he is again trying to minimize this, and he's trying to change the argument. Because these protests are creating chaos, which isn't a crime, but they are creating that chaos by acts of criminality, by breaking the law, and should be held accountable. We're still waiting for Joe Biden to say that they will be held accountable, that law enforcement is correct in arresting them. We're waiting for him to say that these individuals who have broken the law, who have rioted, who have destroyed property, who have intimidated their fellow American, that they will be held accountable to the law as the law states.
People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked. But let's be clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students. There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism.
There's no place for hate speech. What's hate speech? Notice he doesn't define what hate speech is. Anti-Semitism, we know what that is. What's hate speech? He doesn't define that. That's a nitpick of mine, but let's go on.
Islamophobia or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans. It's simply wrong. There's no place for racism in America.
So now he's turned it into an argument of racism. If you oppose, and he is implying that if you are opposing these protests, if you don't agree with them, if you're out protesting against them, he's implying that this is either some form of racism against Palestinians, against brown people, not that this is an opposition to the stated purpose of Hamas, which is terrorism, which is the genocide of a group of people because of their religious ideology, religious faith. He's ignoring that aspect, and he's creating a window of justification for these protests, these riots that have taken place, and the support of Hamas. He is very directly switching the argument, switching the emotional impact that this is having on Americans, and he's trying to gain sympathy for these protesters, saying that, well, the people who are in opposition, they're racist. That is the implication of his statement, that somehow this is about racism, this is about Islamophobia. No, this is about violence. This is about intimidation, as he just stated, that this is about the illegality of what is happening, destruction of property, and coercion of individuals. These are crimes, the autonomous zones. These are crimes. But now he's talking about racism. That isn't what this is about.
It's all wrong. It's un-American. I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America, we respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes. It needs to be done without violence, without destruction.
Now, this is the perfect point for Joe Biden to prove that everything I have said so far is wrong. To say that we cannot abide the violence, the destruction, the intimidation. This is the moment where he says law enforcement rightly should break up these riots to end these autonomous zones, that they should instill the rule of law in these 30 different colleges across America, if not more, and that those who have broken the law will be held accountable. This is his moment to say that this isn't justified. Riots are not justified, and that anyone who is breaking the law in this manner will be held accountable. This is his moment to make that clear for all of America.
Without hate and within the law. You know, make no mistake, as president, I will always defend free speech, and I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law. That's my responsibility to you, the American people.
Okay, yes, these are his responsibilities because he's in the White House. He hasn't said that he is enforcing the law. He hasn't said that he supports law enforcement in enforcing the law. He hasn't clarified where he stands. Yes, we know that the president is there to support the Constitution, the amendments, and the laws of the United States. That's his responsibility. What we're asking for is to take action, to take a stand, to make his position known, and therefore to influence the future of these autonomous zones, these riots, these acts of coercion happening on our college campuses. Where is that statement, Joe Biden?
My obligation to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. He's done. He said nothing. He has said nothing. There is the law, and then there is protest, and then there are riots. We already knew that. He established things that we already know for a fact, that Americans have the right to protest. Absolutely. No one has disputed that. Americans have different points of view and different ideologies. No one has disputed that. That's not a question. That he does not support anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. No one expected that he did. So he hasn't actually said anything. This is an empty statement. This is useless. It's a waste of time. No wonder it only took 3 minutes. He's not saying anything of substance. And that's what we need. We need a strong leader making a statement of substance. And Joe Biden isn't doing that.
Mr. President, have the protests forced you to reconsider any of the policies with regard to the region?
No.
Now, that last bit was a comment from members of the press. They asked him, and the one question they asked is, are the protests actually working? Are they achieving their goal, which is to change the policy of the United States government, to try and influence, to coerce Joe Biden to change his position, which we saw in the Michigan primaries actually did happen. Because of Rashida Tlaib and the Dearborn, Michigan influence, 100,000 potential votes, when Joe Biden saw that there was that opposition, he then turned around and unilaterally made a decision to create a port for Hamas to enable them to have more money and more weapons and funding than they had had in the past. So they had some impact. Now the question is, are the college protests also having a similar impact because of their potential non-votes for Joe Biden? Is this working? His answer is no, that he is going to continue to move in the path where he is playing right now, playing both sides for Israel and for Hamas. He's building a port for Hamas. He's funding Israel. He's funding Hamas. He sent them $9 billion in the most recent overseas funding bill. So Joe Biden is playing both sides and not picking a side, not making it clear where America stands in this issue. And he has completely avoided the consequences to Hamas for killing 34 Americans, for taking 22 Americans hostage, torturing them, and sexually abusing them, possibly several of them being dead at this moment. He's avoided that completely. This is what Joe Biden had to say. And let's put this in context as we showed you in the past. So we know that the very same groups, the same areas where we saw the BLM riots across America are the very same places that we're seeing the riots today. And we're seeing many of the same people who were involved in those riots in the past are the ones that are involved in the riots today. And these riots are all about one thing. Let's listen to, again,
this wretched system. There's only one way. Just like that chant that we enjoy so much, there is only one solution. Intifada revolution. We must have revolution so we can have a socialist reconstruction of the United States of America.
So again, we are hearing that this is about changing America by force, by coercion. And that should trouble everyone. And that was that video clip, which is one of many video clips that can be found not from MSNBC, not from CBS, not from the mainstream news media that are avoiding showing this to the American people, but this is from citizen journalists, individuals living their lives who are there on the scene and actually recording this. It is important. Joe Biden does not want you to think about that. Instead, we are seeing things like this. It's very interesting because when we look at these students and we look at what's being said, this is from April 30th. The mainstream news media did not want to have this conversation. They don't want you to see this conversation, but this is something that they know is happening. What is it? These students who are supporting Hamas, look at the scarf that she's wearing. This is a statement of support of Hamas. And what she is saying here is that her protests should be subsidized by Colombia, which gets money from the federal government, therefore is also should be subsidized by you. Listen to her list of demands.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in, I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that, very deliberately, in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building, now would you please bring us food and water?
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
They're stopping the delivery of food?
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it
but
violently.
They haven't stopped it yet.
Well, I don't know to what extent it has been attempted, but we're looking for a commitment.
And the Grubhub.
Now, you heard this yourself, and we even see from the community notes, as confirmed by X, student campus food is still available to the students. The John Jay Dining Hall, the Fact Check, JJ's Place, they're open. These students can eat, even though some of them are being suspended because of the violations of law that they have had. The majority of those who are protesting, no one has stopped them from being able to continue to eat, but they want public support. They want outside influence. This is political. This is about gaining mass support because they can feed themselves. Going on, humanitarian aid is for saving lives in the most dire situations. The students do not deserve humanitarian aid. They aren't under a natural disaster. They're not in a violent conflict. In fact, the only conflict that has been created is for them breaking the law and law enforcement trying to uphold the law and their conflict with that. They destroyed property. They have fought with police. They have sought to not be arrested and sought asylum for their actions. As we said earlier, there have been over 1,600 arrests, and that should be a wake-up call for America. Joe Biden didn't want to address that, didn't want to address the magnitude of this. That since April 18th, we have seen this growing across America, that there are more riots, there are more autonomous zones, there is more attempts at coercion at our colleges, the highest levels of learning in our nation that are meant to be preparing the next generation of Americans to lead this nation forward. Where are they leading us? And we see that this is growing. It's gone well beyond the Harvards, the Ivy Leagues across America, even at Binghamton University, one of the larger state universities here in New York. They now have a pro-Hamas autonomous zone that exists. Consider that. It's growing and getting bigger. And where are these tents, these students who are supposedly unable to feed themselves, that have no housing, even though they're surrounded by housing? Where are they getting the money for this? We've seen individuals like Ilhan Omar's daughter say that she had nowhere to live. Where are they getting, if they don't have the money for housing, they don't have the money for food, they don't have the money for supplies that they are demanding be given to them, where are these tents coming from? Where are the resources coming from for them to put all this together? Oh, that's a question that, again, the mainstream media doesn't want to address as this continues to grow amongst colleges. This isn't happening in cities. This is in colleges alone. But what we are seeing is, and what is very clear is, there are outside agitators. This isn't about the students, and we believe that a large number of the individuals who are being arrested, who are breaking the buildings, that are defacing and vandalizing property, that are getting into physical conflict and promoting more conflict, that they tend to be outside agitators, individuals who are coming from other states, other countries, to try and rile up the students and to promote this civil unrest, this lawlessness. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, a progressive by his own words. He called himself a practical progressive the day that he won the election on CNBC. He stated, and I quote, "There are individuals on the campus who should not have been there. They were people who are professionals, and we saw evidence of training." I know that there are those attempting to say, well, the majority of people may have been students. You don't have to be the majority to influence and co-opt an operation. That is what this is about. This is a global problem that young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children, and I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of New York City. So we know, and it is being identified, that outside groups are radicalizing students, much like at Cornell University, where students were declaring themselves members of Hamas, a terrorist organization, to intimidate their fellow students, where we saw Cooper Union, where the pro-Hamas protesters were trying to break down doors to apparently attack students that didn't agree with them. That we have seen this across college after college, large and small, across this nation. Joe Biden had an opportunity today. He had an opportunity to reinforce the law as it exists, to try and call for peace and calm while allowing protests to continue to exist. He could have done that. He could have said, as the chief law enforcer of the United States, that those who break the law will be punished according to the law, not more and not less. He could have said that, and he could have had some influence on what's happening next. He chose not to. He was more concerned about going to North Carolina, about his re-election campaign. He was more concerned about maintaining a fence-sitting position so that he can get the maximum number of votes and donations to his campaign. This is horrendous, and we should call it out for what it is. So we hope we've given you some context here on what's happening and how this has happened, and to give you some insight in what's going to be happening next, because it isn't being discussed, and it should. You may disagree, but we want to hear why you disagree, because we are concerned. We are concerned that in the vacuum of conversation, we are seeing the worst elements of our society be promoted and to grow. And we fear that we are seeing some individuals try to replicate what happened in 2020. Mass fear and panic, mass destruction in the billions of dollars, the destruction of lives, the intimidation of people. That's something that America should never have. But that is what is happening. Now, if you disagree with us, we're happy to hear your comments. We're happy to see what you have to say. In the meantime, we hope that this gives you something to think about, and we look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
No Soundbites Allowed is a podcast hosted by Michael Vass. The podcast focuses on providing in-depth discussions on various political and social issues. As the title suggests, the aim is to go beyond quick sound bites and explore topics in greater detail. Michael Vass, the host, engages with guests to analyze and discuss current events, policies, and political ideologies. The live stream and videos cover a wide range of subjects, including politics, economics, social issues, and more. By delving into longer, more comprehensive conversations, No Soundbites Allowed aims to provide listeners with a deeper understanding of the complexities surrounding contemporary issues. AI is listening. Shouldn't you know what AI knows? Aren't you tired of being treated like a child by major media parrots and want to be respected as an adult? There is nothing to lose and a lot to potentially gain, so check out No Soundbites Allowed on all major social media platforms.